Good morning. So, Rolf Furuli's book and his comments on the governing body. Now, as far as I can work out, he believes that there was no governing body in the first century, that the faithful and discreet slave represents individual Christians who, in the last days, are keeping on the watch. He believes that the governing body should not use the word governing, and I believe he's absolutely right on that matter. And then he went into the history of the witnesses, and in particular 1971, when Nathan Knorr gave way to the idea that a group of elders should determine what's going on in the congregation. Now, it's a huge subject, so I'm just going to look at whether there was a governing body in the first century. And certainly by the year 94, when John wrote the Revelation, it appears that there was no central governing body, because Jesus addresses his words to 7 congregations individually. And if we accept the interpretation that the angels of those congregations were in fact the bodies of elders, then the bodies of elders were leading the congregations in the end of the first century. However, if we go a little bit earlier, it seems that there was a group of Christians, mostly made up of the 12 apostles, including Matthias, who ruled on matters of faith. If you remember in Acts chapter 15, the problem of the circumcision, and it went up to Jerusalem to the 12 apostles and older men, and they came up with the solution. And it was that the Gentiles were righteous due to faith, not due to works. And they issued a letter with 4 rules, just 4. No idolatry, because of course the Gentiles were rife with idols. No immorality, which the Gentiles were very lax upon. They weren't to drink blood, which I'm sure the Gentiles were doing, and they weren't to eat strangled meat. 4 rules. And the apostles said, we don't want to add any further burden on you. Now, if we look at Galatians chapter 2, we will see that 14 years past in Paul's ministry, he went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas and Titus. He said, I went there as a result of a revelation, and privately I laid before the leading men the good news as I proclaimed it among the pagans. I did so for fear the course I was adopting, or had already adopted, would not be allowed. So he accepted that the 12 apostles might not accept the way he was doing things. As it happened, they did. But in verse 10, the only thing they insisted upon, so this group of men were able to insist on certain things, was that he should remember to help the poor, as indeed I was anxious to do, says Paul. When was the last time the governing body told us to remember the poor? I'll leave that one with you. On a little bit of defence for them there, I believe they do have a charity, possibly based in France, which helps when there's natural disasters. So I don't want to be too critical there. But the point being that there was a group of men who ruled on matters of faith. And I think Rolf would have done better to have said, look, if you're going to copy the first century apostles, then you can't go beyond what they have stated. You can't go beyond the 4 rules, no idolatry, no immorality, and don't drink blood. You can't go beyond those rules. But they have done, haven't they? We've now got this huge amount of secret rules, and some not so secret, ruling on every aspect of your life. And as Rolf says, they are not a governing body. And the reason I say that is because of what it says in 2 Corinthians 1:24. And Paul says here, "We are not dictators over your faith, but are fellow workers with you for your happiness." If the governing body took notice of that, if they stuck to the 4 rules that the apostles set out, then things would be a lot better. The only problem being that if you are going to do a worldwide preaching work, it does need to be organised, and Nathan Knorr appears to have done that. With some reasonable success. I liked listening to Nathan Knorr, actually. I thought he was a very spiritual person. But in 1971, changes came along, and I can tell you now, they were absolutely dreadful. I was there, but it's a huge subject on its own, so I'm going to leave that for next time. So yes, let's stick to the rules. Let's keep on the watch. That is important. Let us keep examining the scriptures to see what Jesus wanted us to do, how he wanted us to live our lives. And we won't go far wrong with that. Keep on the watch. Thank you so much for watching this morning.